Good afternoon. I'm Bob Zimmer, President of the University of Chicago, and I welcome you to this memorial in which, together with John's wife Stephanie and children Anthony and Christina, we remember and celebrate the life of our friend, our colleague, our family member, John T. Cacioppo. We will hear from several persons who will reflect on John, the richness of his life, the importance of his work, our connections to him, and the deep impact he made on all of us. I would like to begin not by talking about his work directly, as others will follow me who are closer to that specific work, but rather something of my own experience with John and his particular role at the University of Chicago. I was deputy provost when John first came to the University of Chicago toward the end of the 1990s. I distinctly remember the discussions around his appointment, the scientific imagination he demonstrated, the field-defining work that he had accomplished, and the energy that he created around him. In many cases, one would have said this would make him an excellent person to join our faculty, but in fact, the conversations all went well beyond that. They were much more of the tone that this was an important appointment for us, even a critical one, because John could become a true exemplar of the University of Chicago's highest aspirations and what the university is truly about. Two things happened. John T. Cacioppo came to the University of Chicago, and indeed he did become a true exemplar of the university's deepest aspirations and meaning. I got to know John shortly after he came to Chicago, and we had many conversations over the years. Aside from the astonishing contributions he made, and which you will hear from others about, there were four features of John's work and the nature of leadership that he demonstrated that I always found so impressive and indeed moving. First was the intellectual boldness of the scientific vision. John's vision was distinctive, and it broke new ground not only in technique and concept, but in an overriding imaginative intellectual perspective. Second was the bravery in execution. He approached building out this path-breaking program not only with determination, but with the true bravery that is inevitably required, although not often acknowledged, to make such a grand effort succeed. Third, brought into serious scientific investigation some of the deepest human issues that we all confront, combining not only insight and bravery, but deep human compassion and the belief that science could help us understand and address profound emotional and social issues. And fourth, John exemplified the ideal of community through his dedication to his colleagues and students and his commitment to improving the university itself. John received countless accolades in the course of his career, but I want to mention two awarded by the university, being named the Nora and Edward Ryerson Lecturer and being awarded the Phoenix Prize. I mention these because both not only recognize scholarship and academic achievement of lasting significance, but very importantly, by their very nature, reflect the depth of admiration for him among his faculty colleagues across the entire university. The qualities that I mentioned of depth of insight, of personal and intellectual bravery, of deep humanity and compassion, and of commitment to community are, of course, not just features of John's work, but of who he was as an individual. They are what I saw when I first got to know him, now almost 20 years ago, what I saw over and over again in the role he played as a faculty member and as a leader at the University of Chicago. Now, what I will always remember of him as I continue to miss my friend and colleague, John T. Cacioppo. So good afternoon. I'm Barnaby Marsh, Master of Ceremonies. And I'm glad that we can all be here to remember and celebrate the life of our dear colleague and friend, John Cacioppo. In a few moments,
I will be introducing Susan Levine, who's the chair of the Department of Psychology, and our other distinguished speakers to reflect on Jon's amazing life and legacy. But first, I want to just give out some context. The first time I met Jon was many years ago when I was working for as a talent scout for a billionaire who was interested in finding and supporting the most creative people in the world. From my first meeting with Jon, I knew that Jon was some type of genius. As the Margaret and Tiffany Blake Distinguished Service Professor, Jon's vast professional accomplishments were clear to everyone. What impressed me the most was how Jon discussed big, complex ideas. I had many discussions with scholars all over the world, but few people could play with complex ideas as well and with as much fun as Jon. I believe that being able to play with difficult ideas is the mark of a great mind. And as I got to know Jon better, I learned that his mind wasn't just interdisciplinary, but it was integrative. He took data and ideas from many different fields and not only compared them, but integrated them and helped people work together. Our discussions ranged from medical science, evolutionary dynamics, biology, psychology, economics and society, mathematics, and even new ideas in statistics. And throughout, our discussions were infused with a sense of enthusiasm, with a sense of what's possible, and a sense of that there is a possibility before what we see that we can create, and we can create a new type of scholarship. Jon also had a fearless curiosity that I saw in few other people. A new challenge was never seen as a challenge that could hold us back, but a challenge to be tackled and to see how well we could create new types of science and new types of ideas. I also say that Jon had this very special talent for engaging people of different personalities and different backgrounds and to bring them together. He was a member of a club of people who cares for other people, which people instantly recognize and they trust. On our research retreats, he would always encourage people to bring their entire family so people in the group would not have to worry about getting home too fast, but to focus on ideas. It's fitting on many levels that Jon finished his career with work on the nature of love. Whether in focus on a single person or love more broadly, love is one of the greatest, most mysterious, and most powerful invisible forces of all. In sum, during his extraordinary career, Jon planted many seeds. Although Jon is now gone, these seeds continue to grow. And knowing Jon, he would be enthusiastic about the possibilities ahead. And in Jon's honor, I hope that we may therefore press forward with openness, optimism, and love. So now it's my great honor to present Susan Levine. I'll make a few comments. Susan.
Jon's legacy is one that has changed our field. It is the rare academic who is recognized for groundbreaking scientific discoveries, for founding a field, for being a highly effective public spokesperson, and for fostering the next generation of scholars. But that was Jon. He had boundless energy, and his approach to his work epitomizes Daniel Burnham's famous quote, "Make no little plans, they have no magic to stir men's blood, and probably themselves will not be realized. Make big plans, aim high in hope and work." Jon not only made big plans, but acted upon them with brilliance and diligence. His work will continue to have a profound and reverberating effect on the field of psychological science. Several years ago, I heard Jon address a meeting of chairs of psychology graduate departments. He presented his compelling vision of psychology as a hub science with a multiplicity of interdisciplinary connections. As typical of Jon, he not only argued that psychology sits at the nexus of other scientific disciplines with a great deal to offer other fields, but also provided data to support this view. The chairs were mesmerized by his talk, and I was so proud to be his colleague. Jon was also a leader in our department, elevating our science and our graduate and undergraduate programs. Important questions and scientific rigor epitomized his research and his teaching. By demanding the best from his students, he led them to do better. As a mentor, Jon pushed his students to articulate how their research had changed knowledge in the field, why their work was important. These questions were essential to helping them conceptualize their research and communicate the importance of their work to others. In the tradition of John Dewey, he also pushed his mentees to learn by doing. Many of his former graduate students, shocked and saddened by his passing, have articulated in poignant ways what Jon was like as a mentor. There is a shared sense that he remains the biggest influence on their thinking and research, even years after completing their degrees. Although I have spoken of Jon as a scientist, leader in the field, colleague, and mentor, I know that his love of family, his beloved wife Stephanie, and his children Christina and Anthony was first and foremost. As we share our memories and our sorrow at Jon's passing, we especially reach out to those he loved most to express our deep sympathy and to let you know we are here for you. I will now introduce Jack Rowe, Roger Szafranski, and Michael Gazzaniga, who will each share a remembrance. Dr. Rowe is the Julius B. Richmond Professor of Health Policy and Aging at the Columbia University Mailman School of Public Health. Mr. Szafranski, a Chicago Booth alum, is Managing Director, sorry, I lost my place for a second, is Managing Director of Corporate Finance Associates. And Professor Gazzaniga is the director of the Sage Center for the Study of the Mind at UCSB and the president of the Cognitive Neuroscience Institute.
I'm speaking today on behalf of my colleagues in the Aging Society Research Network, several of whom are here. This is an interdisciplinary group of 14 scholars that was assembled by the MacArthur Foundation in 2008. The group represents psychology, sociology, economics, demography, epidemiology, public health, policy, political science, and medicine. The network seeks to understand the challenges and opportunities presented by aging of societies. Each member of this group has deep expertise in one of these areas. Some members of this group had deep expertise in a couple of these areas. Jon had deep expertise in most of these areas. Jon's contribution to our work was remarkable. He was an integrator. In interdisciplinary groups, the greatest challenge is often communicating effectively as scholars come to the table speaking different scientific languages. As he understood several of these languages, Jon could see the connections between the strands of work and catalyze the articulation of insightful and important questions and research strategies. As we try to process Jon's passing, our thoughts are drawn to one very special day, September 28th, 2011. We were having a network meeting, that time in Paris, as Laura Carstensen, a psychologist at Stanford, who is also here today, recounts the events of that day. Quote, "During the meeting, Jon leaned over to me and whispered that he had asked Stephanie to marry him. I jokingly remarked that I'd be happy to officiate that evening. He said that this was a great idea and that he'd email Stephanie to let her know. I whispered back, this is Laura, no, women don't like to be rushed into things like this. She'll want the plan. Jon pushed back, she'll love the idea. By the end of the afternoon, our collective network and staff had planned a wonderful wedding celebration. The event was held in the nearby, I'm not making this up, this actually happened. The event was held in the nearby Luxembourg Gardens. The weather was perfect. Laura officiated, reading the text from her iPad. As the chair of the group, I had the honor of giving away the bride. Frank Furstenberg of the University of Pennsylvania enthusiastically volunteered to be the annoying official wedding photographer and was flitting about with his iPad. Things almost went awry when the police saw our group assembled in a remote part of the park and demanded that we disperse at once. We dispatched Lisa Berkman of Harvard and Tony Antonucci of the University of Michigan, two fluent French speakers, to stall the police and appeal to their innate French romanticism. Following a beautiful ceremony, we returned to our hotel for a lovely wedding reception with memorable toasts from Lisa Berkman and James Jackson of the University of Michigan. Stephanie and Jon referred to this as the best day of their lives. In life, these are the days that we remember. This is how families operate. This is how we will remember Jon, the happiest groom ever.
Good evening. Thank you, Stephanie, for giving me this opportunity to share some of my most heartfelt thoughts and memories of Jon. It is truly an honor. Jon's energy is here, around us, in our hearts, and in our minds. He is my best friend. When I say Jon, I mean Jon and Stephanie. Because if you know Jon, you know Stephanie. They are inseparable. From the very first time my wife Candace and I met Jon and Stephanie at a social gathering for the new condominium owners, we immediately hit it off. We spoke freely and easily. We laughed at each other's self-deprecating jokes. We shared our common experiences with the University of Chicago. And of course, we told stories about our dogs. Normal, simple stuff, but we really clicked, all four of us. Of course, Candace and I recognized the same things about Jon and Stephanie everyone else does. Whenever we saw them and whatever they were doing, they held hands all the time. They smiled at each other all the time. And they listened intently to each other all the time. We knew Jon and Stephanie had something very special that made them so cool and so interesting. It was fun to witness their relationship and be around them because it was so beautiful, so unusual, and genuine. They lived with passion and purpose. They radiated love for each other. All four of us developed a special connection. It was an unexpected gift to have such chemistry between all of us. It wasn't until months later that we learned about the brilliant careers these two incredibly happy people had. They were so humble. Meeting Jon was like meeting someone who said he's a painter. And later you find out that he was Picasso. Jon is a Renaissance man. We learned about their passionate work on loneliness and love. So talented, so brilliant, and so intertwined with each other. But as much as Jon accomplished in his career, no matter how prolific of a writer he was, no matter how meaningful and creative his work is, and how many awards he receives, the most impressive quality about Jon was his love for Stephanie. No matter what adjective you use to describe John, the most descriptive word for John is loving. John really loves Stephanie, and Stephanie really loves John. His love for Stephanie and how he treated her in front of everyone affected me in a profound way. John made me a better version of me. He and Stephanie set the benchmark for what a loving relationship is and can be. I am so grateful to have met John and Stephanie, blessed actually, because it is such a precious gift to meet two people with so much love and respect for one another. It normally takes effort to learn something, but John taught me so much so easily. All I had to do was watch them. Unconditional, unwavering love, committed to each other for life and beyond. John had many virtues and talents, but none greater than his love for Stephanie. They were happy doing anything and everything, as long as it was together. They even took their dog Bacho for walks together, both of them, all the time. It didn't matter if it was sunny and pleasant or cold and miserable. They did it together. I remember one morning during the polar vortex, I got bundled up to take our dogs out. I was double stacked, hat to boots, scarves, gloves. I had it all on, multiple layers of everything. I was hoping no one would see me. I looked ridiculous. So when the elevator door opened on our floor 32 and it was empty, I was hopeful that it would go nonstop straight to the lobby. But as soon as the elevator started its descent, it stopped at 30. Here comes Bacho with her coat on, and John and Stephanie right behind her. Well, I thought I looked silly. John and Stephanie had matching black leather aviator caps on. You know, the ones with the fur bill turned up on their forehead and the fur-lined flaps hanging on their ears with a buckle under their chin? They were hilarious. But their winter ensemble would not be complete without their trademark smile, and of course they were holding hands with their thick winter gloves on. They were smiling, ready to go out in the brutal sub-zero weather because they were together. A real smile is supposed to start in your brain and then show up on your face. But John and Stephanie's smiles start in their hearts and show up everywhere. For those of us who know John and Stephanie, we don't see a couple holding hands and smiling. We see a love story. Stephanie, you will never be alone. John's love for you is the eternal light from the brightest star in heaven shining on you, and it will never fade.
Albert Einstein once observed that, quote, everyone sits in the prison of his own ideas. He must burst it open, and that in his youth, and so try to test his ideas on reality. Well, that was what John did. I didn't know John in his youth, but several of my colleagues did, and were very close to him. They described their young colleague, who always had a better idea, as almost irritatingly brilliant and appealing. These friends stayed with him throughout his dazzling career and constantly consulted with him for guidance. I know every institution I have ever been at recognized his talents and tried to hire him. Actually, everybody who calls themselves a bioscientist actually knows of John's lifetime work. Professor Abby Baird at Vassar did not know John personally, but wrote to me to say, I always teach his work. Young students who think cognitive is hard science and emotion is soft science, that it is actually pretty easy to tell whether a neuron is firing or if blood is going to a certain part of the brain. The truly hardcore science is in constructing the models that help us understand what it means to be human, and that's where John's work is breathtaking. Breathtaking indeed. His work on the emotional state of loneliness, of course, is known to all. Like a true innovator, he not only studied it, but he communicated it to a vast audience. He made the public aware that loneliness is harmful, that when lonely, our brains snap into an evolutionarily determined, non-conscious self-preservation, and we start to show less empathy for others. And loneliness increases defensiveness because lonely people are concerned their own welfare rather than the perspective of people. And loneliness increases unhealthy, impulsive behavior. Jon also thought broadly about the human condition and explored new issues all the time. It was at a National Research Council committee in 2001, studying the veracity of lie detection, that he met the distinguished brain imaging scientist Mark Grakel. They became fast friends and eventually collaborators. Their assignment took them into the inner workings of the U.S. intelligence agencies, courts, legal situations, and more. In that setting, Mark told me, Jon stood out, conveying an understanding of human knowledge that reflected his reputation as one of the world's most outstanding social psychologists. Indeed. My family's personal relationship with Jon blossomed when Stephanie entered his life 7 years ago. Their insatiable devotion to each other from almost the moment they met is manifest to all. In fact, as their behavior never ever changed, their devotion to each other served as an inspiration, and now through Stephanie will continue to do so.
I'll now introduce further remembrances from David Amodio, J. Van Bavel, Jon Kaplan, and Richard Saller. Professor Amodio and Professor Van Bavel are in the Department of Psychology at NYU. Jon Kaplan leads the Boston Consulting Group's Healthcare Payers and Services team in North and South America. Professor Saller, currently Dean of the School of Humanities and Sciences at Stanford University, previously served as Provost and the Dean of Social Sciences Division at the University of Chicago.
My heart goes out to Jon's family and loved ones. And I want you to know that you're joined by thousands in our field who are inspired by Jon's vision, his generosity, and his pioneering work. Jon's career trajectory was singular as it was brilliant. As a graduate student in the mid-70s, he realized that to fully appreciate the human condition, one must consider the interplay of social, cognitive, and biological processes. This might seem obvious now, but back then it was unheard of. He actually had to hide his psychophysiology from the social psychologists, while the psychophysiologists told him that his ideas were cute, but a total waste of time. But of course, this only strengthened Jon's resolve. You don't win an argument with Jon. So his resolve was to do better research with better methods than either of those camps. And indeed, they noticed. In 1981, he received early career awards in both fields. And by the mid-90s, he had been president of their premier societies. Jon operated at another level, and no one's star burned brighter. And the field quickly recognized his vision. When I arrived on the scene in the late 90s, the field of social neuroscience was already taking shape. But Jon's lab was still the only game in town, and I wanted to be part of it. I remember our first meeting. At my first social neuroscience poster at SPR in San Diego in 2000, on his student and my friend Kat Norris's prompting, Jon came by my poster, and it was a huge thrill. He greeted me warmly with his cheerful grin that I'll never forget. He shook my hand, and then he proceeded to grill me relentlessly for 30 minutes on every single detail of my poster. And Kat looked on, cringing. I relished it, though. Jon was reaching out, he was mentoring me, and he was including me in this exciting movement. He was also doing quality control, though, making sure that any social neuroscience research met the standards that he worked so hard to set. He wasn't just mentoring students, he was nurturing an entire field. I last saw Jon in 2016 in New York when he accepted the Sands Distinguished Scholar Award. Jon had been sick already, and we're very lucky that he could come. By then, the field had exploded, attracting waves of eager students who took it in all directions. And standing before this young crowd, you could sense Jon's deep pride and satisfaction. And as he spoke, on his unprecedented analysis of the human social connection, the crowd sat in awe, many with newfound appreciation for his brilliance and energy, his rigor, and his profoundly ambitious science. I thought it was a moment of triumph for Jon. Jon modestly described himself as part of the third wave of social neuroscience. But the field as we know it, which has included, touched, and inspired so many, started with him and only him. We'll miss you dearly, Jon. Never forget what you've done for us.
I lost my my speech on my computer on my way over, so I'm going to speak from the heart here about Jon and talk about some specific feelings and experiences I had with Jon that shaped the entire direction of my life. The metaphor that comes to my mind that helps express how I perceive Jon as a young person in the field was best captured in the famous movie by Milos Forman, Amadeus. The movie opens with Salieri, who, as a young boy, prayed to God to become a composer against his dad's wishes. And as it turned out, things fell his way. He worked hard, and he rose to the emperor's court composer, an incredibly prestigious position. And things were going well. Everybody held him in very high esteem until one day he happened to meet Mozart. And upon meeting Mozart, he was immediately confronted with a transcendent talent, somebody whose brilliance was so far beyond his that it was a shattering for him. And what was most interesting about it was that he was talented enough that he could see the chasm between him and Mozart in a way that few other people were capable of doing. And at the end of the movie, he was so tortured by this that he goes insane and declares himself the patron saint of mediocrities. And this is what it felt like for many of us around Jon. The more you read, the more you learned, the more you published, the more acutely aware you became of how wide the chasm was between you and Jon. He was just simply that good. But he went out of his way to find ways to include people, including people who were young, anxious, out of the mainstream. And this happened to me as a very first semester anxious PhD student at the University of Toronto. Jon came and gave a colloquium, and I was one of the students who helped host him. And I remember not only reading his papers before he came and going to lunch with him and essentially realizing that something I had taken completely for granted, the brain, I thought, was mundane and a boring direction for somebody interested in prejudice and social psychology. He not only convinced me the brain was relevant, but that it was essential to understanding these issues in a serious way. And not only that, but that social psychology was essential to understanding the brain and biology. But what I remember even more about his trip to Toronto was that he took the time to connect with me, pulled me aside, asked where I was from, and I told him I was from a university in northern Alberta, way up in the hinterland. And he told me about a time he had taken a trip there and his experience and how cold it was. Much more bitterly cold than Chicago, to everybody here, just so you know. That's why he was so comfortable and happy walking around in the middle of winter here. He's seen worse. And the story was important to me because I was an anxious first-year student, but also because about a dozen years later, I was reading an interview with Jon. And he, by then, was famous for all his research on loneliness. And he said his dream study would be to study people in northern Alberta who, for the summer, go to these lookout towers in the middle of the woods, all by themselves for weeks on end, and they're totally socially isolated. And he thought this would be a really compelling, real-world, quasi-experimental test of the power of social isolation. And it just so happened that my mom was an administrative person for the Fish and Wildlife and Forestry of northern Alberta, who was key to placing people in those lookout towers. And so I emailed Jon and I suggested he collaborate with my mom. And I have never invited anybody to collaborate with my mother before, and I'm sure it will not happen again. And so they got in contact and tried to set up this experiment to test these people. And one thing he did, I'll remember, my mom is a voracious reader. And he sent her an autographed copy of his book. And to an audience of academics, that might seem commonplace. It happens to us regularly. But my mom must own 1,000 books, and not a single author has ever sent her book. This is her only, her only signed book. And these might seem like, random examples. And the thing that struck me, and I think I remember every conversation I've ever had with Jon, and two of the lessons that he told me at various times, one was that he only collaborates with people he loves, people he enjoys. And the other was that he responds to every email he gets. He tries to, no matter who it's from. And why it's upsetting, but I just want to say that the thing that most impressed me about Jon is, over and above the scholarship and the science and the accolades, is his sensitivity, I think, to people and what he understood what he meant to them in a deep way. And that's impossible to replace. And that's the thing that I'll carry with me after. So thank you.
Jon and I worked together for 9 years when I was at the University of Chicago as dean and then provost. The University of Chicago and Jon Cacioppo, in my mind, were an excellent match in their intellectual intensity and ambition. I had some sense of this when, as dean of the Social Sciences Division, I wrote a cover memo recommending his appointment to the provost in May of 1998. It occurred to me that it would be interesting to see how that memo has stood the test of time, and here are just a couple of excerpts. I wrote about Jon, "This is an extraordinarily strong appointment that could serve as the foundation for building the psychology department for the future, and so I endorse the recommendation emphatically. My understanding is that he has taken various phenomena of social behavior and provided new understandings based on the physiology of the brain and the endocrine system. In tying together the social and the physiological, he's doing path-breaking work." The memo concluded, "Jon Cacioppo's career is extraordinary. At the age of 46, he's invented the subfield of social neuroscience and has been president of 3 professional societies in different fields of psychology. He was rated by my 4 external advisors for the biopsychology search as an A+ candidate. That is, in the category of someone we should do anything to attract. No other candidate received such uniformly high marks." So Jon came to the University of Chicago with high expectations, and he certainly didn't disappoint. And remember that that memo was written when he was 46 years old. He was only halfway through his career. He could be a fierce intellectual interlocutor, but he could also be a sensitive and compassionate friend, and I know that from my own experience. In the summer of 2001, when I was going through a rough personal patch, he called me in my office every morning at 8 a.m. without fail and invited me to go for a walk and a talk on the Midway. He listened carefully on those long walks. He helped me sort out my own thoughts and offered decisive advice. It's hard for me to think of another friend who gave as much time and care as Jon did. All of that in the midst of his fast-paced research agenda. For that kindness and support, I'll be forever grateful. The Social Sciences Division of the University of Chicago has been blessed over the generations with towering intellects. Jon will be remembered with the best of them, and the premature loss of his talent and friendship is a source of pain and regret for us all.
First of all, thank you all for the opportunity to speak. And obviously, I'm honored. I'm obviously humbled in the shadow of a great man. The opportunity to share with you some of my wonderful memories with Jon, a friend that inspires and whom I will deeply miss. I start by reflecting on the three people I know the best at the University of Chicago: Jon, Stephanie, and Bob Zimmer. I happen to know Bob the longest. We won't put any years on that for Bob's sake and my own, but I've known Bob for a very long time. But what I loved about all three of them, and I still love to this moment, is that they all fundamentally embrace thinking, independent thought, and are open to passionate discourse. Probably said better, commit to discourse, argument, and a lack of deference. Those aren't my words, but probably someone else here has said them. I believe this is at the core of what makes us all great, and I choose to learn from all three. Sadly, we have lost one of them from our daily lives. I was lucky to meet Jon and Stephanie 5 years ago as they moved in directly underneath our apartment. They put up with our excessive pounding on the floor and our endless moving of heavy furniture at odd hours of day and night. And in spite of this, always met us with a smile and a warm greeting, even though Baccio would run whenever Baccio had the pleasure of seeing us. Our building, the condominium that we all live in, is quite social. Many of us are good friends and look for opportunities to share experiences in both good and bad times. I have been lucky enough to share many a meal, cocktail party, and workout session with the Cacioppos. My wife, Lorraine, would often comment about how Jon, Stephanie, and I would get lost in conversation together when we all mingled. Candidly, the conversations were always spectacular, never were predictable, and always left us thinking further and wanting to discuss more. Through the years, we simply looked for opportunities to talk and debate, always in an open, energetic, and simply enjoyable way. I once had the opportunity to speak at Stephanie's undergraduate class for an hour and a half with both Jon and Stephanie, and it remains a highlight. Although preparing for the class was quite very entertaining. I recall one session with Jon and Stephanie in their apartment where they were teaching me about the different segments of the brain and how each segment reacts to stimuli. All I could think about was when they were teaching me about this, about how dangerous this conversation that I was going to have with a bunch of students at the University of Chicago. And I had no desire to speak to a bunch of students who knew more about the brain than I did. And all I could think about was how I was going to navigate through that class. Anyhow, the class was actually a wonderful set of discussions, and we never did discuss the brain. I end by giving tribute and bow my head in respect to a wonderful man and his amazing wife. I treasured our time together, love that they are both open and thoughtful, they welcome alternative thinking, and they embraced it in their lives. I hope that as Stephanie transitions, she can continue to bring this beautiful trait forward. I am sure it will take time, but it will be a loss, and certainly not what Jon would have wanted if this is lost with his passing. Thank you.
Her Royal Highness Crown Princess Mary of Denmark has written a letter that Professor Shadi Bartsch-Zimmer will now read.
This letter is addressed to Doctors Jon and Stephanie Cacioppo and was written on the 21st of March. Dear Stephanie, I was very saddened to hear of the passing of your husband, Jon. Jon was a person who left a deep and lasting impression on the people he met during his visits to Denmark, and it was a privilege to know him. When we at the Mary Foundation first decided to work within the area of loneliness as one of our 3 focus areas, we discovered that the only name that came up when searching for leading scientists was Jon's. His continuous dedication, valuable research, and extensive knowledge, combined with his willingness to share his findings about loneliness, have and will, for many years, continue to contribute to the quality and success of our work and the work of many others within the field of loneliness. Jon had a special gift, not only as a researcher, but also as a communicator. He was able to make his research alive and relevant, and through his impressive efforts, he succeeded in shedding light on an overlooked issue that negatively affects the lives of way too many people. I have on several occasions shared Jon's illustrative comparison of the emperor penguin's rotation to survive and our own need to be part of a community. Through his work, Jon demonstrated the clear link between the quality of our relations and our health and well-being. Jon has left an immense and important mark, and his legacy will live on through all of us who use his research in our work. In the Mary Foundation, he will, without doubt, continue to play a vital role in our efforts to combat social isolation, based on the belief that everyone has a right to belong. Our thoughts are with you and your family at this difficult time. With my deepest sympathy and warmest thoughts, Mary, Her Royal Highness Crown Princess Mary, Chairman, the Mary Foundation.
Jon's beloved wife, Stephanie, will now share a few words.
I'm standing here before you tonight to simply express deep gratitude on behalf of your father, your brother, your colleague, your neighbor, your teacher, your friend, your hero, and my husband, the love of my life, Jon T. Cacioppo. Jon had an immense admiration for the University of Chicago and a lot of respect for this historical chapel where he gave the convocation speech in 2002. He would have been deeply humbled and honored by this touching memorial. He would have been especially grateful to President Zimmer for his heartfelt opening remarks, to Her Royal Highness for her beautiful letter, to those of you who spoke tonight, to those of you who are here tonight, and also to those of you who are thinking about him from all around the world. Each day Jon lived, he wanted to be the best of him. And each day he inspired us to be the best of us. Tonight is no exception. His physical passing will not stop his momentum. His spirit, his energy, his grace, his sophisticated thinking now live in each one of us, in each one of you. And for this reason, I am grateful to you too. I'm also grateful to Jon for falling in love with science, for being a pioneer in the neuroscience of human nature, and for finding the social and behavioral sciences to be home of some of the most compelling scientific questions concerning human existence and the potential for its improvement. While he knew the importance of rational processes in causal thinking, he decided to pave the way for a more sophisticated mathematical reasoning of social connections. And he showed us empirical rather than rational evidence that a meaningful life is a life connected to others. His ultimate goal was to make this world a better place. And our world, my world, mon univers, is a better place because of you, because of him, and now because of you. But don't take my words for granted. Let's hear it directly from him. Professor Jon T. Cacioppo.
So one of the good news points about our research on isolation is that people go up and down. If you feel isolated, sometimes it can feel like the end of the world. You've lost your best friend, maybe your spouse for 50 years, and the world has ended. We have been doing longitudinal research. We're now in year 11 of a longitudinal study of isolation in Chicago. And I'm happy to say that people have risen from really crushing episodes of felt isolation. But events, time passes, friends are made anew, and these individuals now are living very happy, productive lives. So sometimes when the world looks darkest, we have to turn that adversity to an advantage. We have to figure out what are the opportunities that are now available, and not give up, just be patient. The worst thing you can tell someone who's grieving is time will heal. It's not really time. Time does help, but it's really the actions, the cognitions, it's how you approach other people that changes with time, but you have to be willing to approach those other people in a way that's positive, in a way that's engaging, in a way that's mutually enjoyable. And from that, one can find life again.